Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of When Movies Were Good. My name is Rachel, and I'm here with my special weekly guest star, Matt. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm great. I can't believe it's 10 episodes already. Time flies.
It does. We thought we'd be out of lockdown, but we've actually here in Melbourne gone into even more severe restrictions, which is a bit sort of horrifying at one time, but then it was always going to be this way eventually anyway if things didn't get better. So hopefully they do. And so we're about sort of week one, or is it week two or one or?
Thereabouts. I think we've got a month left of lockdown. Main thing I know is now that I've postponed my wedding for, I think, the third time. I'm losing track now.
Hopefully the fifth time's a charm. But yeah,
Thereabouts.
So so Matt's had to postpone his wedding again, and we're in like what they call stage 4 lockdown, which is pretty much, you've got to really have a very valid reason apparently to be out on the street at the moment. Very similar to what was going on in the UK, I think, or still is going on over there. But that's okay because we'll keep on keeping on. So we've managed to start our podcast, and we're starting from humble beginnings, and we're doing Gone with the Wind. For tonight's episode. And the reason is because we wanted to pay homage a bit to the late, great Olivia de Havilland, who passed away very, very recently within the last couple of weeks at the great age of 104. She was born in 1916. I mean, you imagine, Matt, the things that she saw in her life, like what life was like for her as a little girl and now.
Yeah, it's incredible, and like that, her life ended in this final stage in this very strange time. But she saw with restrictions and everything, but that she's seen so many phases of history, both in life and in the Hollywood history, and she played such a role in shaping that part of history. And so it will be great to pay homage to her in this episode.
Yeah, definitely. Just the amount of films. I mean, I've only ever touched the surface of anything that she's been in. We've already discussed her and her sister Joan a little bit. We did one episode based on the two of them and some films that they did. But just also she was such a trailblazer in terms of, wanting specific rights for herself as an actress and going to court to get those rights. And just the different, she was an Academy Award winner, back, I think, when Academy Awards actually kind of meant something. And she, the actors that she worked with, the relationships she had in her life, and she really was a part of that golden age. I'm sure not all of it was perfect. And what are your thoughts on her, Matt? You're a fan of hers, though. You talked about her very early on when I met you. So
I do like a lot of her work. I think we both were quite infatuated with her role in Robin Hood, and like for many people, my first introduction to her was in Gone with the Wind, and so, like with Gone with the Wind, and would be in one of those movies that you see every so often because it's quite a long one. You interpret it in a new way because you're in a different stage of life each time, and at the same time, I interact with her work in new ways. Of course, I've only touched the tip of the iceberg with her work, and on top of she became almost of a holy relic of kind towards the end because she was the last of her great generation of Hollywood. I think it is also interesting to discuss, though, the role that she had as part of the de Havilland court decision, which was important on top of her movies. Effectively,
that's right.
She said that she was able to get confirmed in court and at great risk to her career because she effectively had to keep her career on stalemate for about 2 years. But when several production delays, I can't remember exactly what they were caused by, but effectively the studios, in theory, at the time could arbitrarily rope you into being contracted with them for longer if you were unavailable for whatever reason. And obviously, during World War II, this was quite a problem, and Olivia's case happened quite soon after that. And so it meant that effectively you didn't have actors shackled to contracts with studios unfairly and indefinitely after that. And that did pave a way to a new era of the studio system. And like, we don't really have the studio system now, for better or worse, but Olivia did help contribute to I think a good phase of the studio system where actors got a fairer deal in terms of when they were fairly contracted in the terms of their agreement, while the studios also did their professional responsibilities.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, I did read a bit about that, the court case that she had. And I recently watched the first movie that she did after that, which was called, I believe, The Well-Groomed Bride, with Ray Milland.
Your pillow fantasy.
Definitely. If I could take a time machine back to the 1930s. But so we'll get into this. So just to encapsulate that, I think the only remaining member of Gone with the Wind still alive is the baby that played her son Beau in the movie. I was reading that he was the last person of the cast that was still alive. And Olivia wanted to play Melanie. She didn't want to play Scarlett, and she loved Melanie's empathy and love. And she said it was one of the happiest experiences. While it was a very grueling shoot for everybody, it was one of her happiest experiences as an actress because she was playing a character she loved. So I think that's a fantastic thing. I mean, obviously Scarlett's the role that everyone was vying for, but the fact that she was happy, she would have been, 23, 24 when she did that role. So she was really quite young herself.
Thereabouts, I did the math yesterday.
Yeah, she was very, very young. And, I mean, just an absolute... She was fantastic. Everyone was good in this film. I know some of the other actors had a few issues, but we'll cover that as quickly as we can. So we're talking about Gone with the Wind, 1939, released in 1940, I believe, taken from the 1936 novel by Margaret Mitchell. Now, the novel is a bit more hard-hitting than the film. And obviously certain things going on in the South at that time are more openly discussed in the novel. And that's okay because that's a novel and they made a film and they wanted to make the film entertaining and make it for a large audience. So I understand why they took some. I mean, I might be actually interested to read the novel one day. It seems it would be historically interesting to read. Directed by Victor Fleming, who was also at near about the same time was directing The Wizard of Oz.
Funny story there.
Yeah, he replaced George Cukor that had a lot of falling out with David O. Selznick. And so he got Victor Fleming in, but Victor Fleming was really exhausted and a bit all over the place when he was doing it. So another director called Sam Wood also helped. So George Cukor, Victor Fleming, who's given the credit, and Sam Wood technically directed the film, produced by David O. Selznick, who had his hand in every single pie, from writing the script, everything. So Sidney Howard was given the screenplay sort of honours, and he did write the screenplay, which was about 6 hours long to begin with because he was trying to adapt the book. And then also Selznick got in a bunch of local writers when Howard wouldn't adapt the screenplay down to make it shorter, and a guy called Ben Hecht. And Matt and I have seen... that play Moonlight and Magnolias, where Selznick has to try within 5 days to get apparently that is based on a true story, where he gets the writers in to try and cut the script down and basically sends them all insane. And that is, maybe it didn't quite happen like that, but it is based on a true story. So Ben Hecht did a lot of it too.
Yeah, as far as I know, I think... Selznick had a few more substances fueling his energy besides peanuts.
That's right, yeah. So they managed to get it down, but they did say that it was, it still retained a lot of what Sidney Howard had put into it. He actually died about the time the film came out as well. So maybe that was what that's why they wanted to have him as sort of the principal writer on it. But there were a lot of people trying to get the script down to a shorter, cohesive form. I think they did a pretty good job with it, considering how many people were involved. So we have Vivien Leigh.
Selznick was kind of the only one that knew the whole plot from beginning to end because they kept changing it.
Yeah, that's right. And, we have to remember that it's an adaptation from a book, so it's not going to be exactly the same. So we have the great Vivien Leigh playing Scarlett. Vivien Leigh was English, but she was married to Larry Olivier at the time. When he was over in the US doing one of his first US films, Wuthering Heights, which I started watching. I need to finish off watching it. She lobbied for the role, and there were many other. There's a film actually about how many actresses came out for this role, and while they were actually shooting the start of the film, in terms of the first few scenes that they wanted to start shooting, some of the big Civil War scenes. They still hadn't cast Scarlett, and she came in and read for the role. And I think it was Selznick's brother who actually put her up for it, and she got it. And she beat out some very famous people. We had Leslie Howard as Ashley.
Including Lucille Ball.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yep.
I think everyone in Hollywood wanted this role. Everyone. Katharine Hepburn, everyone. But I think they chose the right person. You know, even though she was English, she apparently everyone had to work with a accent and speech coach anyway. And you know, obviously, you know, at that time they would have spoken a bit differently than modern day South anyway. So I think she worked it, and she was perfect for the role. And Leslie Howard played Ashley, who apparently was a bit indifferent. It was kind of just a job to him. Kind of came across that way to me, but he was fine. He did what he needed to do. The great Clark Gable.
He didn't feel he could do the role at his age, because he was, I think, pushing 50 at the time.
Yeah, so they should have got Ray Milland to do it. So
Exactly.
He would have been right in that age group. But okay, the great Clark Gable, and apparently one of the reasons the film was actually delayed a bit was because Selznick wanted Clark Gable to play Rhett. And, you know, I think he was a great choice for Rhett. And the great Olivia de Havilland as Melanie. So we had Hattie McDaniel in her Academy Award-winning performance as Mammy. We had Oscar Polk as Pork, and the great Butterfly McQueen as Prissy. I think they were all fantastic. I think they were just as good as anybody else in that film. They deserved to be there. She deserved the Academy Award, and they should be proud of their work in the film, and I'll leave it at that. So Sidney Howard wrote the screenplay, as we discussed. Max Steiner did the music, so the great Tara's theme. He was also helped, apparently Franz Waxman and a few other people. They had some musical cues like David O. Selznick had the rights to use some of their music. So some of the musical cues in the film actually have some other composers attached to them. And Ernest Haller, the cinematographer, who I think did a great job. So as we know, let's quickly go through the story, because really the heart of the story is not much. It's the tumultuous relationship between Scarlett and Rhett, set against the backdrop of the American Civil War and Restoration, and two important characters in Scarlett's life, Melanie, and the supposed love of her life, Ashley. So what did you think of the story? What did you think of the script?
I thought it was a very, well, like I said a bit before, I've seen this film several times in my life. The first time was probably about 12, and I'm a different person each time I see it, just because of the time that covers. And when I saw it the most recently for this podcast, there are a few times when I'm so moved by a movie, and I found the story so much more relatable now. Even though Scarlett is terribly vain, she's selfish, I could never in good conscience never even minding some of the things she does to make money afterwards in desperation, just some of the moral choices she makes as a partner, but she's driven by this blind love for someone, which she, at her heart, knows that she can't get in return. And it's kind of that lethal combination of someone desperately in love, but also who can't get it in return, but also someone who's very used to being good at manipulating things the way she wants. And so it is a perfect plot driver. It's and so often Rhett Butler's sort of categorized as just the person that says damn at the end of the film, but I found him to be, like, I admit it's probably not less that he's relatable a character than that I'd like to be him. Except for doing almost date rape in one scene, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But he's the one character strong enough to push this stormy Southern belle towards knowing really that she's sort of really leading herself off the wrong track.
Yeah. I mean, I think it had always just been the length of the film that put me off. I'm really a person that really likes an hour and a half long movies. That's as long as I think a movie needs to be. And if you...
Me too. I do get a bit nervous when I have to test my bladder that long.
Well, and also I guess now, back then going to the cinema was an experience. You had the intermission, got dressed up. It's not quite, obviously, unfortunately, and especially not at the moment. It's not like that anymore when you go to the movies. It's more of a throwaway experience most of the time. But back then it was a great outing.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
up
until the 70s, they were still making the odd epic picture that would have like hour and a half intermission, then an hour and a half. But I think part of that was, for one thing, a lot of film distributors probably wanted shorter films that were easier to have more sessions in, so you get more ticket sales that way. But also, I think studios also learned their lesson that it was dangerous to invest too much in one picture, because often they really went when you have longer movies, you go all overboard with sets and costumes. And like, even look at Selznick, he had all the nicely dressed ladies wearing real lace under their dresses that the camera didn't even see. And when one of the ladies said, "But you don't need to have all this extra lace here, Mr. Selznick. No one will see it," and he was like, "You'll know."
Well, yeah, and it's I mean, and I guess as they sort of moved into the 70s and 80s, they started making these epic miniseries, which I am a huge fan of, those sort of old-fashioned miniseries that went over 3 or 4 nights. So they kind of started doing epic stories in that way, which had a lot of validity. So I always thought, oh, God, if you've really got that much story to tell, do a short-form series or a miniseries or something. But it actually wasn't a problem to watch it. I did watch it in a few sittings, because I'm just not the sort of person to sit there for 4 hours. But it wasn't a problem to watch it. Like, I was happy to go back and keep watching it and keep watching the story. And really, it's like a soap opera. At the base of it is just this willful woman. Every American soap opera and all other soap operas around the world have that major bitch character in the middle, and it's all about, the unrequited love of the person she puts up on a pedestal. And you know what? She actually was a really tough character. I didn't actually realize that they lost Tara, and she lost everything, and her parents died, and she was out there at the hospital and doing all sorts of things. And, as willful and...
Admittedly, she went there in the first place to sort of trap Ashley into going away with her again. But she got to do some good things on the way by default.
Yeah, she did, but she was really put upon herself. There's that sort of triumphant moment at the end of the first half where she's standing in silhouette against the matte, background, and that sort of burnt orange background. And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't actually realize that they lost everything too. I thought she just remained, because I didn't know too much about the film, other than, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, which everyone knows. But I didn't actually realise that she'd lost it all, and a lot of her manipulations were, to try to get back what she believed that she had lost. Whether that made her happy or not, well, that's so I actually did enjoy it. I think what I would have liked to have seen at the start was a bit more of why she was so in love with Ashley, like maybe a childhood scene or something of her, her and him together or something like that, just to give us a hint of why she was so in love with him. It was sort of just like, I'm in love with him, that's it. And it was like, oh, okay. But I guess I had to get, maybe that was one of the...
Because really, to at least get the vibe from the early stage of the film, I can't imagine that Ashley would have actually done that much to encourage her affections, because this was an age where flirtation was moving your glove off your wrist slightly and smiling, that sort of thing. And so love triangles can sort of be more complicated or less complicated now because you can be a lot more showy. But I think it was simply that Scarlett. I mean, it is hard to tell what age she was really meant to be in the film. I'm not sure what she was meant to be in the book. I haven't read the book myself, but if she was sort of in her pangs of first love and used to every boy in the county fawning for her, then perhaps she set her eyes on the most noble character in the region.
Yeah, and I suppose if he wasn't that interested in her, it was obviously she had built him up to something in her mind that he clearly wasn't, and we saw that as the film progressed. So then this character of Rhett comes in, and I mean, Clark Gable is so charismatic in that role, and it just pushes from one thing into the other, and then of course you have this really tragic, horrible backdrop of this devastating war that the US is still trying to reconcile themselves with to this day. And there was
not a moment of genuine glorification of war in that film. It's almost comical the way the gentlemen chaps at the beginning are so enthusiastic.
Yeah, and they were, because they saw it, they obviously saw it as a loss of their lifestyle and how dare you and all this sort of stuff. I don't think they really ever thought about the full implications of what they were doing and whether things were right or wrong. It was just the lifestyle. It was all they knew. So that's why they were fighting to keep it. But that some of those horrific scenes, in Atlanta and, all those men on the ground, that crane shot. I was watching a piece of footage of how they had to do that pulled back crane shot, and that's not something that they could really now. It's nothing to do that. It would probably be all done with computers anyway, but
instead of the dummies with pull arms that they had back then.
Yes, I didn't actually realise that, because apparently they couldn't get enough extras for that day, so they had to get all these dummies, and one of the extras was saying, who was obviously, the interview was done many years ago, that one of the extras who was still alive was like, oh yeah, we were on the ground and we had to make the dummy move and all this stuff. But really, I mean, when I was sort of watching it closely when they showed the footage again, we couldn't really notice, but I just thought overall the film was just such a beautiful looking film, and everybody who was cast in that film was perfect for their roles. What did you think of, so this is more your forte than mine, so obviously because one, they didn't have the money to go to all these locales and build all these houses from scratch and this and that, and Tara was a facade that was built from wood and paper mache and all sorts of things. That was a set. It was just a frontal set. And the house in Atlanta was, it was a building, it was O. Selznick's building, but these places didn't really exist. Everything was shot on that RKO backlot in Culver City, which I've actually visited myself. What did you think of the matte design? It's clear it's not real, but it just looks so great anyway. Well, I mean, what did you think of it?
Well, it's just so... It's such a miracle of creative production, some of the effects they did make. Well, yes, a lot of the scenery can look artificial in a way. Part of it, I think, is the Technicolor they made it in, because those really bright, almost cartoonish colors make it, especially, and that it wasn't all just bright and colorful. For war scenes, they could get really gritty when they wanted to be, and the like. But that colorful punchiness of a lot of the scenes makes you forgive some of the more, because it really is almost like an idyllic watercolor painting. And the fact that a lot of the skies and every ceiling you see, there's not a genuine ceiling in any set they use in the film. That is all painted by hand on glass, which they then put onto film. And I think just modern filmmakers just don't know how easy they have it.
They don't.
It's so amazing. But on top of what they created artificially, one really impressive thing that they did for real was in the scene of the burning of Atlanta. They basically had a huge collection of old sets that they got ready to set alight. And
didn't David O. himself set them all?
Well, not single-handedly, and it was a bit more professional and complex than simply lighting a match to a bunch of buildings. Like, they had a whole system of pumps and fuels, and I think so they could sort of adjust the level of flame so they could control it to an extent. And in that part where you have a final fall of a building that's burning, that was actually the giant two-piece wall that King Kong burst through.
Oh, right. Yeah, I did. I know that they shot King Kong out there, and part of the sets that they used, I did. Yeah, a guy was going around the studio, and he was saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now if your friends ask, I wonder what happened to King Kong's wall, and you can say they burnt it.
And apparently, somebody, the Tara sets, like the facade of Tara, is still around. It's just in a warehouse somewhere in Atlanta. Apparently, someone had bought it, and then someone bought it, and yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me. Going back to Olivia de Havilland, it really hit home of how she was saying that when she moved to Paris in the 50s, how much she enjoyed it. She loves seeing real castles and buildings as opposed to canvas. And you do get an idea of that if you go on one of the studio tours at Universal or anywhere, where you have an idea of this huge, what was once a huge amount of desert and forest land made into this huge lot of ready-to-build sets and walls and worlds that can be moved at will. And so it's like both intoxicating and tragic at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. It's I've been to, like yourself, I've been to a few of those places, and I have seen the outside of what they call the Culver City Studios, which is the Selznick Studios, with that grand white house that was Rhett's house. They ended up using that for Rhett's house and using some matte paintings to sort of make it look like it was in Atlanta back then. And I mean, it's really, it's just amazing that so many amazing things were shot at all these places, and it's like, appreciate it, what went on there. So I just thought it doesn't matter how quote unquote fake all this scenery looks. I just loved it. It just gave it this sort of otherworldly, like dreamlike quality to the whole film, and it's a big raging soap opera-ish love story. And I get that there's some controversial things in it, but it was a film shot in the late 30s, set in 1865, and it's very easy 80 years later to say, oh, this, and this. But at the time, it was a product of the time, and I think we can just appreciate that, you know what I mean? So
it is interesting for some of those actors, though, to hear interviews from them later in their life, because many of them were proud of their roles. Even actually, this is a bit of a story of how we need to be careful of how we are judging any character or scene, because one of the parts of the film that people often pick out as being poor for modern morals in the film is the undermaid played by Butterfly McQueen, who's portrayed as this very nervous person with a high-pitched voice, and I thought, oh, they must have been making her put on this very high-pitched, weak accent. But then I heard an interview with her just yesterday where she was in old age, and that was her natural voice. I felt terrible.
She was fantastic. She was really out there.
She was amazing. I mean, the character she played was in many ways a selfish person. She lied about being able to deliver birth to someone who was very critically ill, and in a war zone. Admittedly, she was fearful for her own safety, but basically every group is entitled to have good and bad characters.
Yeah, and that, to me, the black characters in the film were treated and they were respected as part of the family. Even Rhett says that he wants Mamie's respect. He wants her to like him. He says that in the film, and Mamie dishes it out to them as well, and manhandles them and takes them around. And I myself, I mean, my dad's from Africa and stuff, and I didn't have a problem with it. I know other people do, but
there is actually a story of one of the black extras approaching Clark Gable, and even now it's a big thing if any extra approaches one of the stars unannounced. Tom Cruise once had an extra thrown off set for looking at him directly in the eye, but that's another story. But he told Gable that on the set they had segregated toilets, and Gable, I believe, arranged to have all the signs removed. He was outraged on hearing of it.
That's right, and they want at the Academy Awards ceremony. They wanted Hattie McDaniel there. He wanted Hattie McDaniel there, and they thought it was outrageous that she wasn't there. You know what I mean? So,
what a lot of people seem to critique about the film, in terms of Hattie McDaniel not being having to be taken from the back of the room, and also not being her and Butterfly not being allowed to attend the premiere in Atlanta. That's much more a reflection on the movie houses and the function room that those later events occurred in. Selznick himself went to great efforts to be sensitive to a lot of how he wanted to have a universally appreciable film. Although they're often lumped together, they were made about 24 years apart, but he knew well about Birth of a Nation and how D.W. Griffith had sort of ignorantly made this flashy film and almost stupidly did not think about how some of his more offensive references to the Klan and everything would be interpreted by anyone who was living with the consequences in that time. And Selznick didn't want that to happen to him. He wanted his film to have a good, enduring legacy.
Yeah, I just thought they were amazing, and they were every bit as good as the leading cast, and they made the film as well. Their parts were really important, and they were loved by the main characters. They were respected by the main characters. They were playing characters too. It wasn't just like they were these single-sided 3D, they were 3D characters, who good, bad, the ugly. I just thought they were fantastic, and I thought they really made the film. So, I mean, I guess I must have a different opinion of it than certain other people who are critiquing the film now. But I don't know, have any of these people seen the film? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So,
well,
but
the big thing is that it is a film about Scarlett. It is a film primarily about Scarlett O'Hara and the way she interacts with the immediate world around her. So it isn't a trying to address the entire war. It doesn't look at the history or politics of the Civil War, and only fleetingly looks at I have more issue with how they were dealing with what historians called the carpetbaggers era afterwards, and some of the ways they portrayed the Reconstruction period, but I'm not an expert on it. But I think it was a much more of a human story than a historical one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could go through any historical film and point out every single flaw, and I mean, I get it, but I think most people who are sensible who are watching the film now understand that, time has changed and changed for the better, and it is a thing, it is a product of the time when it was made, and partially a product of the era that it's trying to capture. But at the end of the day, it's about, as you said, about Scarlett. It's kind of her journey, her life, and her family I didn't actually realise the O'Haras. I didn't actually realise her father was Irish. Obviously, O'Hara's an Irish name, but I didn't actually realise her dad was actually Irish, not just a great-grandparent or whatever. So it was very interesting seeing him at the start of the film. So, but overall, I enjoyed the film a lot more than I wanted to. I mean, at the time it was made, it was one of the most, if not the most expensive film made at $3.85 million. I think the 1925 version of Ben-Hur had cost more. And apparently they weren't allowed to say damn in the movie. But
when you watch it now, you wonder, that's the least of anything controversial they could have done. Actually, Well, it's a good line of Gable's of being, you hypocrite, you don't mind about my knowing them, just by talking about them. And there are many innuendos they make that are much worse than damn.
Yeah, that's right. But the production code office, said that they could do it because it was, appropriate for the era of when the characters lived or some such like that. So he got away with saying it. So, but it was a great way to finish the story. I didn't actually realise the film was so open-ended, but that's apparently how the book ended. And then there was a sequel that another woman wrote many years later called Scarlet. So that was made into a mini-series with Joanne Whalley-Kilmer and Timothy Dalton playing Scarlett and Rhett. So I'd actually be interested to watch that because it's apparently about their life after that. So, the soap opera lover in me would definitely like to check out and see. Apparently she goes to live in Ireland for a while. So, for those of you, I'm sure it's available out there if you wanted to see it. It's like a 4-part mini-series. So to sum it all up, I get it now. I never really got Gone with the Wind and why everyone rambled on about it all the time. I do now. It's not something I'd probably go back and watch over and over again, but I'm sure I will see it again in my life, in my lifetime. Maybe it's just one of those movies you just put on. It's there. It's going. You're getting involved in it. She's an absolute cow. He's an idiot. It's beautiful. It's got great music. I love a lot of the characters in it. I love Hattie McDaniel's character, and she whacks her around and stuff. I think it's great. I think it's great. So, I really was surprised at actually how much I did like it. So, you got any final thoughts there?
Well, as far as this is a big film, a lot of huge amounts of historical interest as well as modern social and creative interest around it, and that's why I say, especially for films like this, don't cheap out and get a poor quality version of the film where it doesn't have extra information. It is worth it to either get the iTunes version or a good quality DVD that not only is the picture much better, but you also have all these extra documentaries which are so fascinating and provide so much revealing information. I'd just like to say that we conceived of this episode as a tribute to Olivia de Havilland because she was the last great actress of her era. I'd also sort of like to say R.I.P. to Vivien Leigh because she was on the opposite spectrum. She was taken from the world far too young. She had also great problems with mental health as well, and so for those two great ladies that made this film, I salute them.
Yeah, and I didn't realise that 3 out of the 4 of the lead roles in this film were English. So Leslie, Olivia and Vivien. I mean, Vivien was born in, British India. Olivia was born in Japan to British parents, but some part of Japan where English people lived, I think, at the time, from what I was reading. And then Leslie, I believe, was from the mainland UK. But to have 3 out of the 4, were actually English, and they pulled it off quite well. So, which is.
And Leslie Howard, it's fascinating because he actually was one of the first major actors to die during World War II, not in combat, but he was on like a sort of goodwill mission in a civilian plane, and it got hit down by the Germans in circumstances that are still not fully known till today.
Yeah, I was reading that before we went on air, and I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realise that had happened to him. So that was, and good old Clark Gable came from Ohio. So there you go.
Yeah.
So there you go. So, and they all have their place in film history, thanks in part to this film. So thank you to everybody who was with us on this discussion, because we don't so much review films, we discuss them and we talk about our feelings to do with them. So we wouldn't ever say to someone, don't go and watch something, watch it, make your own mind up and see what you think about it. And this is a film that you should do that with if you're so inclined to one day. And just a quick introduction to our next film double that we will be discussing, to John Steinbeck, the John Steinbeck double with Grapes of Wrath, 1940, directed by John Ford, and East of Eden, 1955, directed by Elia Kazan. And Matt and I were just discussing that we needed to see Grapes of Wrath, and I've been meaning to see a James Dean film for like the past 20 years and have never got around to it. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to dispel from my mind, because at the moment I haven't read or seen Grapes of Wrath, and at the moment the only image I have in my head is Nelson from The Simpsons doing a diorama of the Grapes of Wrath by crushing grapes with a hammer at his school.
Well, of course you do. But I'm actually looking forward to these, to doing these too. So it's been a long time coming, and I've heard a lot about both of the films. A young Henry Ford was in Grapes of Wrath, and obviously James Dean, the late great James Dean, was in East of Eden, one of the big three films that he made before he died. So I'm looking forward to it. I know Matt will look forward to it as well. And just, of course, before we finish tonight, Matt, I have to say that Dallas, the TV show, was set, our shot at the Culver City studios. We're gone with the Winders films. Just had to put that one into it as well. So
if it's got Larry Hagman, Rachel knows about it.
Yes, Larry Hagman, Ray Milland, several other people, definitely. I'm there for it. So thank you to everyone for and Matt, just tell everyone where they can find us again.
As always, we're on YouTube and Vimeo, so to be notified of future content, please hit subscribe, and also tap the bell notification, because you don't automatically get informed anymore from YouTube just by hitting subscribe. So if you want to get notified of new episodes, tap the bell. But we release a new episode every 2 weeks, and you can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at When Movies Were Good. Just look for the Bogart.
Yeah, thank you. So check us out there, and we hope you join us on our next one. So in the meantime, I'm Rachel.
I'm Matthew.
And we're watching good movies. Thank you, and good night.